pay my rent, all my money is spent. I love New York. I love it. I love this city. But it's becoming unaffordable. This city is becoming for the rich and the rich only. Why is it poor people squalor and die somewhere? It shouldn't be like that.
When Mr. Wasserman took over the complex, he soon after started harassing all the older tenants because this is a rent-controlled, rent-stabilized building we stay in.
Royal, come on, Royal.
And I addressed him one day, and my roommate addressed him, and he asked her, how does she like living here? And she said, there's a lot of problems, and the building needs to be fixed. He said, if you don't like it, you can get out. I'm Marquette Bell. I've been living here at 424 Hawthorne for 11 years. I am a disabled veteran. I got hurt in the Navy in 1990, and I was not fit to serve anymore because I had got meningitis. So I have a lot of residual side effects from the meningitis. I have very bad headaches, you know, but I'm still able to do things. I have a bachelor's degree in hospitality and restaurant management, so I'm a personal chef. Our landlord took us to court for the first time for non-payment of rent. We went to court. He had already cashed the rent checks. So why were we in court? We already cashed the rent checks, you know. He was like harassing people, making you waste your time, you know, take days off of work, reschedule whatever things you're doing.
He stopped sending rent receipts forever. I'd have to go to the post office every month and have it certified. Because if I didn't, he would come back and say that he never received, that I never sent it.
No. Roy, don't kiss you.
I have COPD, so I've been on a lot of medications. So most of the time, you know, I'm not feeling well enough to go outside, you know, especially when the weather is bad and when it's cold.
There's a lot of problems with the rooftop. So a lot of people that live on the first floor, the ceilings are always having big water bubbles. The building, it needs a lot of work.
This is one of the problems we've constantly been had since I've lived here for the past 11 years. Is the mold in the bathroom where it leaks into the pipes. The pipes, all behind the pipes is moldy. You clean them. I just cleaned them with bleach yesterday, and they keep coming back. Mold in the tub. You see where the mold is eating the paint. Maybe every 6 months they'll come and paint and does the same thing. It's very bad on my COPD. You know, it makes my breathing problems even worse.
I've waited countless hours. Sometimes, you know, they'd come, they'd work for half an hour and leave the job incomplete. He's used every tactic in his books to frustrate the tenants that he doesn't want here. And so far it's been working because a lot of people got fed up and they moved out.
My garage door came completely off the hinges in the 1st of March. Here it is, June, and they still refuse to fix my garage door. I've had a few things stolen out of here. The workers are painting the back of the building and they leave their trash in here. I keep corresponding with him, calling him, because I really need my garage because I'm a disabled veteran. Like I said, sometimes I build some heavy medication for my allergies and for my migraines. I barely need to park my car. But you know, he doesn't care about my inconvenience and my medical issues. The area's been gentrified. Kings County Hospital is a block over. And then another block over is SUNY and downstate. So you have a lot of medical students. So he likes those type of people. So he wants us out so he can get more of them in who don't care about what he's doing. They just need somewhere to stay for a year or two. You know, our rent is like $1,500. If he renovated, he would probably rent it for $2,500 to $3,000. The most important thing is for people to know their rights, even the new tenants. They need to know, what I tell my neighbors next door and some other neighbors that moved out, that these apartments are rent stabilized, rent controlled. You should be paying $2,500 in rent, because I'm quite sure the previous tenants only paid $800, $900 at the most in rent. So you guys shouldn't they shouldn't jack it up that much, you know. You need your service people. You need your nannies. You need your bus drivers. You need the people to clean your homes. You need your personal chefs. You know what I'm saying? If you put all of us out, we all displaced, who's going to do those jobs? I enjoy Brooklyn. I love living here. I wouldn't trade it for the world. We got to fight together for stronger and tougher rent laws. It's important to get these politicians' attention and let them know we know what's going on. We know the underlying motive. We know who's buying you. We know who's funding your campaign. But we, the regular people, we have a vote. And sometimes all it takes is 10 votes for you to lose your job in office. You work for us. You don't work for the 2% people. You work for the 98% people. You need to keep that in mind, because when it's time for re-election, we will make sure we keep you in mind and not vote for you.
Have a long memory. The deal reached in Albany last week on rent regulation laws and tax abatements for developers, a deal which affects the people living in about 1 million New York City apartments and the future of affordable housing in the city, was passed a few minutes before midnight, days after the members of the legislature were supposed to have gone home. Now, the descriptions of the deal range from a legislative achievement to a disaster avoided to a total failure.
To guide us through the bill's intricacies and to touch on Monday's historic decision by the New York City Rent Board to freeze rent for one-year lease apartments, we're joined by Marlene Peralta, Senior Associate for Progressive Cities and former Senior Political Reporter for El Diario. Welcome back to BK Live.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And Marcelo Matenis from Neighbors Helping Neighbors, a subsidiary of the Fifth Avenue Committee. And ladies, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Well, just to start off the conversation, after months of speculation and negotiations, Marlena, can you tell us who were the winners and losers this week?
The losers, tenants, obviously, because they did not get what they needed. You know, they needed stronger rent laws, and this deal is definitely not stronger. It's actually weaker. No matter what the politicians tell you, you know, this is not going to protect tenants from getting displaced from their apartments. Republicans got their way because this deal was pretty much everything they were pushing for, and you know, unfortunately, that's just the way it is.
So Marcella, looking at that piece where we just saw those two women living together in Prospect Lefferts Gardens, and their lawyer, they need a lawyer at this point, their landlord is clearly harassing them. Now, there were some provisions that said, all right, for every instance that we prove, you get $3,000 worth of fines, and now we want to bump that up to, what, $11,000? So how would those women take action to stop this bad actor and get him in the courts?
So as Marlene said, some of the stuff that was passed was really kind of cosmetic, and the harassment penalties was one of them.
Right.
It's really important to understand that harassment is very difficult to prove. Harassment is something that happens more than once over a period of time. And really, it's great that we have a law and it's great that we have penalties,
right,
but it's been very difficult to bring cases forward because of the difficulty in proving them.
So would something like that rise to the level if she said, you know what, he's not cashing our checks, and then he pulls us, or he's cashing the checks and taking us into court, and now we have to go and get this notarized delivery? Right. Is that harassment, or is that just business?
That is harassment. So it's two things. It's harassment on the tenant, and that's just one instance. So we're talking about having to have several types of harassment over an extended
types.
Well, different, right? Because it's just one incident.
Okay.
If you want to prove harassment,
but
you
if
have to
he
prove
did that every month, would they have a case, or he has to do that and some other crazy stuff?
It would be that and other crazy stuff. So this is the problem, right? We have the laws on the books, but they're really no good until they're actually litigated.
Gotcha.
And this is where we've been stuck. We've been having difficulty bringing good cases forward because we don't have sufficient substance.
Gotcha.
You know, the city just recently back and forth, the city council and, you know, Mayor de Blasio went back and forth on more cops. We don't need more cops, more cops. Now we're going to get 1,300, you know, more cops, or we're going to stay at the same level. But, you know, why isn't there at the state level an opportunity for them to come forward and say, well we need 1,000 more, you know, advocates or policy agents or housing agents to enforce sort of these laws? You know, you can say, hey, we're going to charge the landlords $3,000, $11,000, but if it takes so much to define harassment, you know, how is anyone ever able to prove harassment without agents on the ground?
Well, so one of the things that we want to stress is this is why we were asking for stronger rent laws. there's currently 2 advocates in my office in Sunset Park, and our catchment area is so difficult. We see about 300 folks a year. Adding advocates is a small Band-Aid to the problem. What we really need to do is strengthen the rent laws. And what we really needed, and what happened was Cuomo actually came forward and said, we need to repeal vacancy decontrol. And then he backpedaled and did nothing to push it forward. And what's happening is vacancy decontrol is when the apartments read 2,500. Well, now they just lifted it to 27, and the apartment becomes vacant. It is no longer rent stabilized, and it becomes market rate, right? So we know that some of the rents are already 2,700. So that $200 increase, as you can tell, did nothing. But what we really need to do is repeal vacancy decontrol altogether, because what's happening is these landlords have an incentive, and the incentive is to convert these affordable units into market rate. Get rid of the incentive, the harassment is going to slow down and hopefully go away.
And to your point, Governor Cuomo established a task force to deal with the issues that you point out. What happened? Tenants were still getting displaced. So they have more penalties, but there's no police officers in this case, or inspectors, as we call it, enforcing anything. So you still have loopholes in the laws that landlords are going to take advantage, and no one is going to do anything until it's too late. We have thousands more displaced. So obviously this is something that happened in 2011 when the rent laws were extended, and this is just a mirror of what happened back then. So again, we're gonna be losing a lot of rent stabilized apartments because of not having a stronger rent law.
So we got into the weeds a little bit right out of the gate. So I'm gonna ask if you would walk us back a little and sort of give us an overview of that last minute, big, ugly, big, lovely, whatever side of the table you're sitting on to tell us what it really means and shook down to.
Well, I mean, I guess the last minutes, a lot of people were really paying attention because Cuomo had come up with an op-ed like a day or two before saying that, calling for the repeal of, of the vacancy decontrol. And last minute, none of that was reflected in what was pushed. And he was the one pretty much getting the Assembly and the Senate to come up with an agreement. So, it's like, that's why a lot of tenants are accusing him of the backroom deals, because again, you say something, but at the end of the day, what's on paper is something completely different. And if you look at the laws, yes, you got tax rebates for homeowners, and you have a threshold that doesn't apply to the tenants that really need it the most. Maybe the Republicans' districts are, have higher incomes and that applies to them, but those are not the majority. What about the rest? I mean, who can pay $2,500 for an apartment in New York City if you're talking about low-income families? Not even moderate income families. You have to have multiple people working and making good salaries to pay $2,500 for a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartment. So that's just not realistic to what we have to deal with in Brooklyn, in the 5 boroughs.
But also just to touch on something that was said in the clip, holding our elected officials accountable, right? Part of the big ugly is that they put all these bills in to kind of like, you then have to choose which one you want. And so we were very strongly speaking to our elected officials. We were in touch with our assembly members, and we strongly urged them to vote no. And those tenants in their, in their districts have a right to go back and check to see what they voted on and question their elected officials. And I think you're right. Part of the problem is this is not, Cuomo, again, Cuomo came out and said he wanted to repeal vacancy decontrol, but he never once actually met with the tenants, even though the tenants coalition groups actually requested a meeting. He had for months already met with the real estate industry. And at the end of the day, the deal was not done within the actual legislation. It was done in the back room, 2 men in a room. The problem was there was 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. That was the real problem as well.
Well, you know what? There was the shuffle, and things have changed. Silver and Skelos are gone. There were 2 new folks in, but not a lot of happiness with the result. And people were saying that this was held up so long past session because of that. Put on your political reporter hat. And how much did that really affect what came down with those guys being out?
Well, yeah, I mean, in this case, yes, you're right. You have 2 leaders who are rookies in this, at this point, the Republicans and the Democrat. But Cuomo has the power to guide this. Yeah. So we didn't need to wait till last minute to move things along. Yeah. And even more reason not to when he pushed whatever was pushed from the beginning.
Right.
You know, even though he said he was going to push for or that he was in favor of vacancy decontrol, Republicans got away with not, you know, letting that happen. So he still, you know, did whatever we were suspecting him from from the very first beginning. So, you know, I guess he needed a push, and he was thinking or, you know, hoping that the Senate and the Assembly was going to come into an agreement, which we knew that was not possible, and that's why we were pushing him from the beginning. But again, you know, I think it was not necessary, and I think even though we waited last minute, I think we could have pushed for more. And, you know, there was a lot of pressure, and I guess Democrats just gave in and said, you know, let's do this.
Okay. You know, you did bring up the Senate, so I wanted to ask you, if the Democrats take control of the Senate, can this be reversed, you know, earlier than in the 4 years?
Yes, and you have seen columns in the papers already speculating that because, you know, Democrats were pretty much with their hands tied and couldn't do much. If they get the control of the Senate, they will put that back on the table, and I feel like that's really what's going to happen if it happens.
So Marcella, back here in the city, de Blasio, the first time his 9 got to vote, we had the freeze. So for from October till September, if you sign a new lease, it's going to be flat. Was that like a good thing? Is that like one bright light in this thing?
That's one bright light. It's going to give a bunch of families, working class communities, the opportunity to kind of catch up and get a little bit of relief. Tenants have an option, even though if they were renewed in the past for 2 years, to this year, that if they want to, you know, take advantage of the 0% increase, they have a right to renew for 1 year.
Now, it was a 7-2 vote, but I don't know how you would have voted, because I know you're not a fan of this victory for de Blasio.
Well, I mean, it's a relief, but it's a minor relief. I mean, you're talking about what if you have a rent that's almost $2,700. This is not gonna really affect you in any way, and we're just talking about 1 year, you know, 1 year renewal, and we're talking about part of the tenants whose contracts are up for renewal, you know, today.
Still don't
but
get
what
the
about,
thing.
you know, next year? The rest of the people who are up for renewal. You know, it's a minor victory, I would say, but it's really not, you know, it's not the root of the problem. A lot of more people are still gonna be displaced in the long run.
And it's not going to stop harassment. We are still seeing folks coming in with current increases of 1% for 1 year being charged something completely different or a flat rate. So again, the most important thing is for tenants to be informed and tenants to know their rights. But you know, this is not going to deter landlords from the harassment that they're doing. They're being successful with the harassment, you know?
And a lot of tenants do not know their rights. I mean, we're talking about maybe you work with tenants who seek help, but what about the rest? You know, they're gonna take advantage. And if the law says you can take out that unit from rent control, rent stabilization, you're gonna do it because it's your money that you're going after. And that's not going to stop under the current laws.
But you know, last night the Post had their editorial, it's the Post, they had an edit that they were saying, you know, this rent regulation, we have a housing crisis, and we need those apartments out of this control, and that's going to help the city. And I have, where's my note here? Oh, it's the disaster of rent regulation is the big reason why New York faces a permanent housing shortage, because the rent laws have taken millions of units off the market, which rich ones, tenants, are hoarding and holding on to their bargains.
And that was said by a landlord. Come on, it's the same story that we hear each and every time. You know, the whole point of rent regulation was to stop price gouging, right? If you are the only one that has, if you're the only one that has a product, then you can actually control what that price is. And rent regulation is just to even it out. For landlords that are claiming that they have tenants that are making too much money, there's a way of actually finding out, and if they are, then they would then pay market rate. So there are ways to make adjustments. But again, you know, we're talking about property owners who feel that they have the right to charge whatever they want, and that's completely understandable. But what I don't understand is why do they keep buying rent-regulated apartments that they know have legislation instead of buying, either private houses or just start from scratch, like these new developments that are happening. Most of them are market rate.
Okay, so I want to segue right into that. We only have a little bit of time left. Sure. We've been talking about landlords and tenants, but can you talk to us about what the developers may have gained or lost with 421A?
Incentives. If we want to build more luxury condominiums that low and moderate income people can't afford, this is why 421A, it's incentivized. And yes, the mayor has this argument that without it, we're not going to be able to build more affordable housing. Right. But again, what kind of affordable housing? What kind of incomes are you taking into account? How many units? It's all under this bubble that we're still trying to figure out because it's still not clear. And it's proven that in the past, 421A has not created much compared to the kind of incentives that the city has given to developers.
So as it stands now, 421A can live if they come to some kind of agreement with the people, builders and construction unions, to say you've got 6 months to get yourselves together and we can keep this alive. Why wouldn't they do that? If they can still get paid and give a little money to these guys, I don't understand how that reforms the entire housing problem.
Well, part of the problem is they're focusing on creating new affordable housing,
right.
And that's a great piece, and we definitely need that. But we're in a housing crisis. Unless we focus and put all our efforts into preserving what we have, we're not seeing the results that 421A is supposed to be giving us, which is the affordable housing. The income ranges that you need to qualify don't really, our folks in working class communities can't qualify for those things.
And putting it into perspective, the mayor's plan is to create 80,000 new apartments, right? And the Alliance for Tenant Power, which is one of the organizations I work with, came out with a report last week saying that under the current plan, we're going to be losing up to 90,000 units. Yeah. Put that in a balance.
Yeah. So, Marla, you brought up the mayor. Let's go to the city council. The speaker was here, and she talked about getting money for legal aid for people to take people into court. Is this something that's going to come to fruition in time to preserve some of those apartments, or will it apply even to these sort of landlord-tenant matters that the city councils put that money in the kitty for?
I mean, it's a good thing because, yes, tenants need that a lot. Like I said before, a lot of tenants don't know the rights, and this will help mitigate some of those challenges. But again, if you put that in a balance, it's not going to be fast enough or quick enough to prevent a lot of displacements. I mean, if you're talking about incentivizing a luxury condominium here, and then you have a rent-stabilized building here, the landlord who owns a rent-stabilized building is going to do whatever it takes to get those people out so they can, he can compete with their luxury neighbors, next door. Yeah. So it's something that's happening everywhere, and we're not really mitigating the heart of the issue.
So are we at the point of no return? Have we passed that, the Rubicon?
I think no. I mean, we can still fight and protect as many people as possible. But again, displacement, it's continuing.
So Marcella, just finally, there's the last question. We have folks who are living in rent control apartments right now, and like the Post or someone else would have you believe that it's like Mr. Drummond or George and Wheezy who got into their apartments 4 decades ago, and they're paying $1,000 a month for 4 bedrooms on Park Ave. Who are the real people who are living in these apartments that are in danger of disappearing?
I would say that the people that are there are the original New Yorkers. I mean, people that have been here, people that have actually, something that was said, the working class folks that actually make New York City what it is and make it moving and make it run. And the great thing about rent-stabilized apartments is you can actually pass them down, and your family members can succeed. And so what we're seeing in some of these rent-stabilized apartments is intergenerational families, because we have grandmothers and grandkids and, different age groups there.
All right. Thank you so much for coming by. I think we just scratched the surface, Aaron.
I honestly have more questions.
We're still wrapping our brains around it. We hope to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.